In my last video, I talked about the 3 criteria that make a good video game remake. If you didn't watch my last video, the link is in the description, but I will give a quick recap. Picking up from where we left off in my last video, there's one game I wanted to talk about that I would argue does not follow any of these criteria. This game being a remake of one of my most beloved childhood video games. Often you hear games like Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, Halo Combat Evolved, and even Half-Life are credited as being revolutionary to the genre of first-person shooter video games. But
there is another
shooter that made great strides for the genre that I don't think gets enough credit for it. That game being 007 Goldeneye for the N64. Goldeneye, developed by Rare Software, was based off of the 1995 film 007 Goldeneye, and was released for the N64 in 1997. Now, I'm not trying to be some hipster and say that Goldeneye was underrated or anything. I'm well aware of how popular this game is. What I'm trying to say is that this game doesn't get enough credit as being a revolutionary game to the FPS genre. Goldeneye absolutely perfected and popularized split-screen multiplayer. It featured a wide variety of weapons, modes, and well-designed maps that brought many friends and families together or tore them apart. Also offered an extremely high-quality single-player campaign that featured diverse settings and objectives. There were missions that involved stealth, and then there were missions where you get to drive a tank, mowing down everything in your path. Literally everything.
Tank beats everything!
The level design was top-notch. Offering large maps with various objectives complete allowed the gameplay structure to maintain a free, non-linear style. Many people, rightfully so, praise Halo's level design for being open and non-linear, but Goldeneye's level design had these elements before Halo CE was released. To me, this single player still holds up to this day. The graphics were nothing groundbreaking, but they looked pretty good in comparison to a lot of other N64 games at the time. The faces of the characters always made me laugh. The main cast of characters looks like they printed out a JPEG of the actors' faces and just glued it onto the front of a polygon head. In fact, I bet that's probably what they did.
Do I look like I know what a JPEG is?
Fast forward into the 2000s, we had some absolutely incredible FPS games that came out. Halo Combat Evolved revolutionized the genre with the 2-weapon system, giving grenades their own dedicated button instead of taking up a separate weapon slot, adding in vehicles and vehicle physics, etc. Half-Life 2 also set a precedent for how FPS games could have strong stories and be great single-player experiences. It also demonstrated the strength of the Source engine. BioShock further solidified the immersion and atmosphere that developers could create with a single-player first-person shooter game. And then, something incredible happened. In late 2007, Halo 3 came out and truly showcased the complete package of what an FPS game could accomplish with not only a single-player campaign, but probably one of the greatest local and online multiplayer games of all time. It also included features like Forge and theater modes. This was also the year that another, more relatively unknown shooter came out. Have you heard of it? It's called Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. Yeah, this entry to the Call of Duty franchise basically changed the landscape for modern first-person shooters, especially for how online shooters would play forever. Offering more fast-paced gameplay, customization of weapons and loadouts, kill streaks, this game really made a name for the franchise. With such momentum that the FPS genre had in the 2000s, it was easy for many people to forget about how important games like Goldeneye were. The Call of Duty craze took the gaming world by storm during these years, in what was known as the Golden Age of Call of Duty from 2007 to 2012, each year harboring a new title that would hit the top 10 best-selling games of the year. Of course, with the success of Call of Duty came many FPS games that tried to emulate its style and success. But what does Call of Duty have to do with Goldeneye? Well, dear viewer, it has everything to do with Goldeneye. Let me explain. You see, Goldeneye may have been left in the past, but it was not forgotten by game developers. Former president of Nintendo of America, our boy Reggie,
My body is ready.
wanted to release Goldeneye for the Wii's Virtual Console, an emulator that allowed players to purchase ports of older games from the Wii's online store. But this would be incredibly difficult to accomplish because Rare, the developers of the original Goldeneye, were bought out by Microsoft, and Microsoft had been planning to release a port/remaster of Goldeneye for the Xbox 360 that included online multiplayer. But needless to say, this build of the game got stuck in development hell and was never released, which is a shame because it looked really promising. Now, the license to develop and publish Bond games had been passed around like a hot potato by gaming companies. Nintendo was the first to have the license to kill, license to develop Bond games. And then it was everyone's favorite publisher, EA. Eventually, EA also dropped the license to kill, the license to develop Bond games. Alright, I'll stop making that joke now, I promise. And in 2006, a small company named Activision purchased the Bond licensing. Activision. Does that ring any bells? Oh yeah, the publishers of Call of Duty. That Activision. So what is the first thing Activision does with this license? They commission Treyarch. Yes, that Treyarch that made Call of Duty World at War and the Black Ops games to make 007 Quantum of Solace. That released in 2008. But that's not what we're interested in here today. We're interested in the next project they released, which was, you guessed it, a 007 Goldeneye Remake. Now, Activision had commissioned a studio called Eurocom, which has since been defunct in 2012, rest in peace, to develop this game. They had worked with Nintendo to make this game a Wii exclusive, which was a nice nod to the original Goldeneye being for the N64. Although, a year later, the game was ported to PS3 and Xbox 360, so I guess it's the thought that counts? Nintendo revealed the Goldeneye remake at E3 2010, which sparked a lot of hype in fans. Many people who had fond memories of this game were getting excited to have a remake to bring back those weekends of getting all the friends and family together and messing around on 4-player split screen with their favorite maps and characters, to replay their favorite missions in the single player mode in crisp new graphics. Little did they know, if they were looking for a remake to faithfully recreate the Bond game they knew and loved, they were gravely mistaken. The E3 trailer of the game definitely looked a bit too promising. Many of the short clips shown in the trailer were definitely chosen to look like areas from the original game, but even in the trailer, there was one thing that seemed off. Daniel Craig! Well, I'm gonna be honest here, I've only actually watched a couple of the Bond films, one of them being Goldeneye, albeit it was being played on TV, and I was pretty young while seeing it. But even I know, it just feels a bit jarring to insert Daniel Craig in Goldeneye, especially when even the cover of the original game has Pierce Brosnan's face on it. Maybe there were copyright issues, or they couldn't receive permission to use Pierce Brosnan's likeness again for this one, but it's still uncanny. This is just the tip of the iceberg for this remake, unfortunately. Let's start with the gameplay. Remember when I said Activision was the publisher of the Call of Duty franchise? Yeah, well, I said that it would be important to Goldeneye, and it is. This game plays like a Call of Duty game, but with a James Bond skin slapped over top of it. I know a lot of games tried to compete with Call of Duty at the time that this game was released, but I didn't think Activision would need to compete with itself, for crying out loud. We had the time to kill being like Call of Duty's, we had the ADS style looking like Call of Duty, weapon loadouts in multiplayer, sprinting, the 2/3 for this game, weapon system, and regenerative health instead of the health packs and armor system of the original. Although I do appreciate that they have a difficulty setting for the campaign that uses the classic health system. They even added this slow-mo door breaching gimmick that the Call of Duty campaigns became known for. Now I know a lot of these elements are what make up modern first-person shooter games, but GoldenEye's gameplay style is still so fun that they could have kept it almost the same, and just made the controls and movements more fluid and really revamped the graphic style. Completely changing the way the game plays to be more like Call of Duty just makes the game lose its identity from being GoldenEye. If I were to play multiplayer on this game, not knowing it was GoldenEye, I would have never guessed that it was a remake of the beloved N64 game. I would have probably thought it was a Call of Duty game ported on the Wii, which did exist, by the way. Now let's get to the story. The original GoldenEye on the N64 more or less followed the story of the film, adding some extra levels here and there for gameplay factor. Now I know it can be hard to believe that there was a story to this game, but it was told completely through text boxes that suddenly appeared on the screen. So it was pretty easy to miss, especially as a kid. I guess voice acting was out of the budget for this game, but considering the quality of voice acting in other games during this time, maybe this was a blessing.
That was too close.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
The story of the Goldeneye remake is very loosely based on the original film's plot, but tries to place this game into the Daniel Craig continuity of films, being set between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall. The level design is significantly changed from the original game and film to fit the Daniel Craig interpretation and tone of James Bond. Speaking of the level design, the remake takes a much more linear approach to the level design, like a lot of first-person shooter games at the time. Just progress and shoot everything in sight, with some stealth sections included in there. So if you watched my first video, you'll know about the 3 criteria that I felt made a good remake. So how does 007 GoldenEye hold up against these criteria? Criteria number 1. It stays faithful to and respects the source material. Well, GoldenEye doesn't do this very well. As I had mentioned before, not only has the story received significant changes, but the gameplay retains nothing of what made the original game unique, and is basically a Daniel Craig-skinned Call of Duty clone. Criteria number 2. It adds upon the existing game by adding new features, modes, fixes outdated gameplay features, etc. The GoldenEye remake definitely adds a lot upon the original, but many of the changes do not respect the source material. I will say, many of the extra multiplayer modes, weapons, and maps are a good addition to the game. However, it's disappointing that the game itself is not recognizable as a GoldenEye remake. Another thing is the music. GoldenEye for the N64 had an absolutely amazing soundtrack. All of the tracks are bangers in my opinion, but especially the pause menu theme. Just look at how much more personality the pause menu in GoldenEye N64 has over the GoldenEye remake. The GoldenEye N64 pause menu is literally James Bond's watch, and scrolling through it you can see your objectives, your weapons, the items you're carrying, etc. Whereas the GoldenEye remake, the pause menu is literally just a boring, regular old pause menu. Yippee! They had an opportunity here to make the pause menu James Bond's smartphone, because in the remake, of course, he's got to use a Samsung Galaxy S2 to take pictures and be his spy gadgets and whatnot. Criteria number 3, it enhances the graphics and or visual style of the game. Well, the graphics are definitely better for sure, but I wouldn't say the visual style of the game is an improvement, as it also has a completely different art direction and design for its characters, locations, weapons, etc. The visual style in this game was crafted, as I said before, to fit the Daniel Craig style of Bond, so I wouldn't call this an enhancement per se. A good remake should make the game look as good as we imagined it would have looked when we played it back in the day. We used to use our imaginations to enhance the graphics of the games we played and fill in the gaps that limited older gaming consoles. To change the visual style in the way that GoldenEye did is not a clever use of the imagination, it is more so an easier route to take to just follow the style of the current thing in front of you. I would be lying if I said I didn't find 007 GoldenEye fun. I actually did really enjoy this game, and it was one of the better first-person shooter games for the Wii at the time. As a standalone game, it was a pretty good game all around, but this game so obviously used the GoldenEye name to build hype around its release, and boost its sales because of the name alone. Because Activision decided to prioritize profit, crazy I know, over making a faithful remake, I can't say that it is a good remake at all. In fact, it's an awful remake. At the time of its release, though, it had positive reviews from big game reviewers like GameSpot and IGN, who gave it a 9 out of 10? Dang, that's crazy. The game was also more or less well received by its audience as well. From what I could find of internet posts during the time, there actually wasn't a whole lot of backlash for this game. I guess this was also before social media was a big thing and as household as it is now. Split screen multiplayer still offered me with some fun times playing with friends and family, even if the map design was not as great as the original, and the gameplay was more Call of Duty-like than N64 GoldenEye. Nowadays, you'd be extremely lucky to find an FPS game with split screen or any local play at all. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, to me this game just feels like a wasted opportunity. They made this game and called it Goldeneye in the first place to quickly cash in on the name of a once revered and nostalgic game. People to this day still talk about the original N64 game with a fond nostalgia, but I've yet to meet any notable number of people who reminisce on this Goldeneye remake. The real tragedy is that because this remake never made the impact that the original game did, it doesn't seem like we will ever get a faithful remake of the beloved N64 classic in the near future. But maybe that's okay. Maybe there just is no possible way to faithfully improve upon or even recreate the masterpiece that was the N64 Goldeneye. Or at least, maybe it's impossible to make something that will even impact us in the same way. Anyways guys, thanks for watching, I appreciate your support. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. Until next time.